Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's Thursday live stream. I'm Julie Barrett, founder of Conservative Ladies of America, and we've got a packed live stream today. So buckle up. Let me know where you are watching from. If you are part of our Washington audience, and for those who are watching for the first time, Conservative Ladies of America actually started in Washington State as Conservative Ladies of Washington. And now we have expanded nationwide, which has been interesting and fun. There's so much going on all across the country, and what happens in blue states like Washington quickly spreads across the country. I see our leadership team in the chat, Mary and Joy. Hello, ladies. Great to see you. So if you're in the chat, you can chat them up, but let me know where you're watching from. And if you have any questions as you go through it, as we go through today's live stream, we've got a lot of stuff that we're going to cover. And just a little bit of background about Conservative Ladies is we are primarily focused on policy at every level. So state level, federal level, and even down to your local level. So your city council, county council, your school board, all of these government entities pass legislation and policies of some kind. And this is what we really like to dig into. And we are just a group of citizens who got concerned about what was going on in America and in our community and decided to start digging into these policies. And so our goal is to make it make sense to the average citizen, break down some of these policies so they're easy for you to understand most importantly how they're going to impact you and your family, and also give you an action item so that you can respond to these types of policies, hopefully before they pass. So let's dig right in because I've got a lot to cover today. You would think with a government shutdown that there wouldn't be much going on, but there is. And one of the things I've found interesting, this is the first time that I've been paying attention to legislation where there's been a government shutdown. And I look at the bills that are introduced in Congress every once in a while. And what's been interesting is that during this shutdown, there have been well over 100, maybe a few hundred bills introduced during the shutdown. While Congress is shut down, the Congress people have no qualms about introducing new proposed legislation, and most of them aren't good. And one of the things that's important to know is that every legislative session, hundreds of bills get introduced and just a fraction of them actually get passed. One of the things I think is really kind of interesting as someone who's kind of new to this arena is that so much of it is just unnecessary and stupid. Designating a day for this or that, designating a month for this or that, recognizing this or that. I mean, it's so much big government, really, and not what our founders had in mind for our country, and limited government, and really just making it free for the people and having government just ensure our life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We've gotten so far from that. So I first want to dig into some bills that were passed in California, signed into law in California on Sunday, which I thought was really interesting that Newsom chose a Sunday to sign these bills into law. He signed into law one of what I will say is probably one of the worst pieces of legislation that I've seen yet in my 4 years that I've been doing this. And you've probably heard about it. It's Assembly Bill AB 495. And this bill is it's funny because he actually passed it off as a parental rights bill. The press release on Newsom's website called this a parental rights bill, and of course was countering all of the misinformation out there by people on the right. But it is called the Family Preparedness Act. And really, this is about immigrant families and to supposedly protect immigrant children. However, the way that this law is set up, it pertains to any child, and it is a very dangerous law. I think that with this particular law, we are going to see a huge rise in crimes against children and trafficking of children. So the law, AB 495, bars childcare facilities and preschools from collecting immigration related information. It encourages families to help to create safety plans in case of immigration enforcement. It allows parents to designate emergency caregivers without triggering custody changes. Now, the form that people can use to change this designation does not require parental consent. The person that goes in to become the designated custodian of the child does not need to prove that they have the parents' consent. This is why it's really, really dangerous. And so essentially this could happen to a citizen's child. This isn't specific to immigrant children. This is across the board. And one of the arguments that was made by several of the people that opposed this bill was that there are already protections in place through, the California Child Protective Services to ensure that people who aren't supposed to be designated caregivers or custodians for children are not allowed to do that. And the process there wasn't like a ton of red tape. And so the reason for them to do this wasn't really making sense. It also embeds sanctuary protections in early childhood education, basically normalizing noncompliance with federal immigration laws and enforcement. They are really the whole package of bills that was signed on Sunday is really about setting up that blue state firewall to prevent the federal immigration enforcement from happening in the state of California. So AB 495 is particularly dangerous for children. But I want to show you the other bills in the packet, and I wish my child called right before I went live, and my husband came in the room right before I went live. So I got a little bit distracted and didn't have all my files uploaded. So give me just a second here. Let's look at these are these are the total laws that were put into that were signed on Sunday. And again, I think it's interesting that he chose a Sunday for this. I personally thought that he would not sign AB 495 because, last year he vetoed a very big, bad transgender bill. And I think he only did that for optics. And I thought he would maybe do the same with this. But then as you think about what they're doing in blue states and really painting Trump and the Trump administration as the bad guys, it makes sense why he would do this as part of this broader package and signing these bills into law, because you do have so much TDS that happens in places like California, Oregon, and Washington. And so it makes him look like the good guy. And the way that they have framed it, I'm sorry, Joy is sending me a message and it distracted me. The way that they have framed it is to is that they are protecting families, they are protecting parental rights, they are keeping immigrant families together. So let's take a look at these other bills. Assembly Bill 419, this limits immigration enforcement in educational settings. So, of course, my cat is getting sick. Hopefully you guys can't hear that. Hopefully my microphone is numbing that out. But this creates school-based sanctuary zones. And so ICE agents cannot come to schools unless they have a warrant. I don't think this is actually happening. I think we hear it from people on the left, and we hear it from people like Gavin Newsom and Bob Ferguson. But I don't know that ICE is actually going to school campuses and rounding up children. I haven't seen that either. I haven't seen video of that either. And so I want to skip ahead to Senate Bill 307. This basically extends that prohibiting ICE on campuses. It extends that to colleges and universities. And so they can't work with, they have to go through the campus police if they're going to do something. They can't just go on campus. So then we have Senate Bill 294. This mandates employer disclosures during immigration enforcement. And so basically it mirrors a policy that we're going to talk about Washington, forcing employers to notify the workers and delay federal audits. So really there's a huge protection of immigrants and blocking any kind of federal immigration enforcement efforts. Now, Senate Bill 307, we covered that. Senate Bill 580. This empowers the California Attorney General to set immigration enforcement. So this basically puts the Attorney General, who right now is Rob Bonta, as the gatekeeper for all federal immigration enforcement. So we've seen that resistance in California when Trump sent in the National Guard. What was that, a month or so ago? Now they are codifying into law their resistance. So as the problem with that isn't just here and now with the Trump administration, but as this moves forward, a subsequent governor or attorney general would obviously have to abide by these laws. And repealing laws is very difficult. It's much different than an executive order, which can be undone with the swipe of a pen from the next administration. All right. So that is what happened with California on Sunday. And I think that's sneaky. But of course, we know that the left that's what they like to do. They like to be sneaky, and they like to do it when nobody's looking. So let's take a look now at what's going on in Washington. Back at the end of August, Attorney General Nick Brown put out a report. Basically, it was his 2025 labor report, but it's got a blueprint for what they're going to do with immigration enforcement moving forward. And a couple of the key things that were noted in the report is a surge in federal I-9 inspections and warrant-backed raids. They're saying this was not lawful oversight, but these were disruptive events that they need to be resisting. They also Nick Brown said there was a chilling effect on immigrant labor participation, ignoring the reality that federal audits target fraudulent documentation and unlawful employment, not legal workers. But that's not really what they care about. They don't care about the legal workers. And as you know, especially if you live in one of these blue states, that they have a lot of illegal immigrants in the workforce, and they are very concerned with protecting those people. In addition to just having them in the workforce, I want to remind you all that these states have a lot of services and supports for immigrant people, immigrant families that are not legal, that are paid for by the taxpayers. So there's a ton of funding that is going from the citizen taxpayers of these states to these illegal immigrants. And this is a big priority for people in Washington State and California. And one of the things I want you to kind of keep in mind as we talk through this is you're going to see a lot of parallels from what we just talked about with California to what you're going to see in Attorney General Nick Brown's report. And this is all by design. Nobody comes up with these ideas on their own and in a vacuum. All of this stuff is copy paste. These people are coordinating quite a bit. As you've probably seen, we put out a lot of content on the West Coast Health Alliance, where they're coordinating on vaccine and health information and recommendations and things like that. They're doing the same thing with immigration. They're doing the same thing with a number of different issues along policies. They're coming together. And I think one of the things that kind of concerns me is seeing citizens kind of dismiss it as, well, that's unconstitutional. They can't do that. That's unconstitutional. If you watch legislation as closely as our team does, you will come to find that there are very few policies and pieces of legislation that are actually constitutional. And nobody seems to really bat an eye on the constitutionality of a lot of these policies on both sides, Democrats and Republicans, which is really disappointing to see, and was one of the things that I wasn't really expecting when I got involved in this. So they know it's unconstitutional and they don't care. The challenge to unconstitutional laws has to be done through the judicial system. That means that you have to have the money and the resources to hire an attorney. You have to show that you've been damaged by the policies, that you've been harmed in some way by the policies. And sometimes that takes time, especially with some of these that pertain to children. You have to show that your child was harmed. So it's very backwards. These things cost a lot of money and they take a long time. And the judicial system is also captured, as I'm sure you are aware. One of the things we just saw, was it yesterday or the day before, SCOTUS turned down a case from Colorado parents about keeping gender identity a secret from them in the public school system. The SCOTUS turned it down, but a couple of I think it was Alito, wrote an opinion on it and said that this is something that the court is at some point going to have to address. It was very disappointing that they didn't address it right now, but apparently some of the claims weren't, the case didn't meet the bar for the Supreme Court. So that is unfortunate. And that's another example of, you really have to have a child that's been substantially harmed, I think, before they're going to take up these cases. Excuse me, I'm going to let my cat out. I'll be right back. Okay, go. Of course, they wait. They're napping, and then as soon as I go live, they want to get out. Okay. So the other thing in Attorney General Brown's report was that he stated that there's an urgent need for safeguards to shield immigrants from federal and employers from federal accountability. So let's go through the report. I'm going to show you. Does it let me? Oh, look at that! Every now and then I get surprised. Okay. Let's take a look at his recommendations for the future. This is, wish I could make this a little bit bigger. Can I? No. No, that's all I can do. Okay. That's too small. Hold, please. Let's just try this. I don't know if you guys can see that. Maybe it's too small for you. But okay, so he wants to do launch a dedicated strategic labor enforcement unit within the Attorney General's office, partner with L&I to improve existing safeguards, existing enforcement processes, pass the Immigration Workers Protection Act. So let's talk about the Immigration Workers Protection Act. This is one that mirrors one of the bills that was signed into law in California on Sunday. This would require employers to notify employees of ICE I-9 audits within 72 hours. It prohibits ICE access to non-public workplace areas without a judicial warrant. So basically, this bill forces employers to act as shields against federal law. So you're putting employers and businesses in this very difficult position where they're going to have to be the shield between their employees and federal immigration. And that could, you kind of have to wonder, well, how is that? What are the legal implications of this going to be from a federal standpoint with these businesses? Will they be out of compliance with federal law? This is something that is very, concerning, because now you're forcing these employers to obstruct federal law. The other thing is it's going to be, you're going to have this strategic labor enforcement unit. This is what he's going to be working on with this will be in coordination with L&I. It would be a new division in the Attorney General's office. This would pursue labor litigation modeled after the policies that we've seen in California, New York, and Massachusetts. This will centralize power in the Attorney General's office, and it will align Washington with these other states, so similar to the West Coast Health Alliance. And then the expanded partnership with labor and industries. This would include a joint review of enforcement statutes and internal practices. The goal being to increase wage recovery and retaliation claims. So this is basically about rewriting enforcement rules behind closed doors with no legislative oversight. So even though the legislature is Democrat majority. So when you think, well, oversight, well, there's not really very good oversight there anyway. But this even removes any kind of, legislative oversight from the Democrats, and it gives the Attorney General's office the sole power to do that. So again, these are just recommendations, but this is what our team is looking at for 2026 legislation. This is what we're looking at is going to come down the pipe from the Attorney General's office. And the Attorney General does request a number of pieces of legislation. For instance, Bob Ferguson, when he was Attorney General, he was requesting like the assault weapons ban. He also requested the SHIELD law that protects people that are providing abortions and so-called gender affirming care for kids that come in from outside of Washington. Then you would also have this monitoring and challenging federal action. So protecting Washington workers from the attacks of the Trump administration. This would call for more litigation against federal executive orders and agency rulemaking. Attorney General Nick Brown has dozens and dozens, maybe over 100 now, lawsuits against the Trump administration on the taxpayer dime. This would have this policy would have a state level oversight of private labor relations if federal protections were reduced. So this is basically a preemptive strike against federal authority, and Washington wants to replace the federal labor law with its own activist version. And then I just wanted to show you. This is just, I know this is kind of small, so you guys probably can't see this, but I will, if you go to our website, conservativeladiesofwa.com, and click on blog, I've got this linked there. Plus I've got a whole breakdown of what we believe is coming in 2026 based on this report and what was passed in 2025. So all of these bills that you're seeing on this page here were passed during the 2025 legislative session. Now, I haven't gone through each of them. Some of them we opposed during session. There's so many, there literally were over 1,000 bills this session, and we can't possibly watch all the bills. We do have our area, our scope of focus, which is kind of 5 policy areas, and immigration hasn't really been it until these last couple years, when there have been a lot of really harmful to citizens immigration policies. So I haven't gone through all of these, but there are a couple that I do want to tell you about. Did I? No, I guess I didn't. So I'll give you the numbers. I've got to pull it up here. One of the things that we often hear from citizens is that we need to elect more Republicans so that we can change things. And while I agree with that, I think it's also important for citizens to understand that when it comes to policies that are being passed in Olympia, a lot of them are being passed with bipartisan support. And one of the most troubling things that we see when it comes to the bipartisan support is when it is the Republican leadership who are voting for bad policies. So on the Senate, you have Senator John Braun, and in the House, you have Representative Drew Stokesbury. And a lot of times when we see bipartisan voting on some of these bad bills, we'll see those two guys voting for it. And that's concerning from a leadership perspective, because they have huge influence on how the caucus is going to vote on policies. And if they were to, let's just say that the Republicans had more seats, or a majority had more say in the legislature, what would be different about this? And immigration policy is one of the areas that we see a lot of bipartisan stuff. And you've maybe seen the press conference that I think Ferguson and Brown have both done press conferences about the Keep Washington Working Act, which is the sanctuary law that was passed in 2019. And every time they do a press conference about it, they talk about that it was bipartisan. And you had it. I think it was J.T. Wilcox, Drew Stokesbury, and Alex Ibarra in the House. If memory serves me correct, those are the three that crossed over and voted yes. And what I believe happened there, because they always say, well, you don't know why we did it, you have to ask why we did it. I believe the why is because Ibarra he's in Eastern Washington. He's in a very agriculture heavy district. And so he had to vote yes to, or he might lose his seat. And so the other guys voted, and Wilcox was the minority leader at the time. Stokesbury is now, and Wilcox is out of the legislature. So you had leadership voting with him essentially to give him cover, which I think that's a really crappy reason to vote for a bad policy. If you are going to lose your seat for voting against a bad policy, so be it. I mean, I think we have to be willing to stand up for what's right. So Senate Bill 5104 is one of the ones that passed this year, and it is about preventing employee coercion based on immigration status. So what it does, it prohibits employers from referencing an employee's immigration status when they're involved in wage disputes or related labor issues. So this bill effectively weaponizes immigration status as a shield against employer accountability. It creates a chilling effect on legitimate documentation, checks, and opens the door to retaliation claims that bypass federal verification systems like E-Verify. It also positions state enforcement through L&I, Labor and Industries, as a gatekeeper over what employers can say or do in relation to federal law. So 10 Republicans in the Senate voted to pass this bill. Now, again, the Democrats are in the majority. They don't need the help of the Republicans to pass their bills. But you had, again, in this case, it was the leader is John Braun. He's the Senate minority leader, and he voted for this. And he's also, he's running for Congress now in Congressional District 3, which is Southwest Washington. And if he doesn't win the seat in 2026, he will just go back to the legislature because his seat in the Senate is not up for re-election until 2028. So that's kind of a safe gamble for him to do that. On the House side of the vote for Senate Bill 5104, the immigration status coercion, none of the Republicans crossed the line. So it was good to see that. And then we also had Substitute House Bill 1875, which is paid sick leave for immigration proceedings. It allows employees to use their paid sick leave to prepare for or attend immigration proceedings. This repurposes employer-funded benefits for legal processes unrelated to health or workplace safety. It subtly normalizes noncompliance with federal immigration law by embedding it into state labor protections, effectively subsidizing legal resistance to federal enforcement. And again, this was opposed by every Republican in the legislature, which is how we like it to be. So again, you can go to the blog on our website, conservativeladiesofwa.com, and that is on our blog, and you can click through the Attorney General's report there and see all of the different bills that were passed this year on kind of the anti-immigration bills. Okay, shifting gears a little bit. This is we're going to talk about a congressional bill so that's Washington, D.C. We're talking about a federal law. This would apply to all 50 states. It's called the Stop Hate Act, and I did a video on it a couple weeks ago, and I did a Substack on it, I think. This is not the first time it's been introduced. This is, I believe it's the third time. It was introduced in 2021 and 2023. It's a bipartisan. Anytime you hear the word bipartisan, that should be a little bit of a red flag for you to pop the hood and look at what's going on under there. Because usually when Democrats and Republicans agree on something, it's usually not good. So, hey, Alberto, California Elephants checking in. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. I see DP is talking about a couple Oregon. She's taking your 2A through Senate Bill 243 and 114. Did those get signed into law? I know that Oregon and California has also signed just recently signed a couple of really anti-2A bills. And I'm sure that Washington is up there chomping at the bit to get their copy-paste legislation ready, which, you guys, it's October 16th, and pre-filing for the 2026 legislative session in Washington state is going to begin in December. I don't know the exact date off the top of my head. But going back to the Stop Hate Act, this is the Stop Hate Act of 2025. They first started coming out about it in July, I think it was July 24th. It's Representative Bacon and I forget the Democrat's name, but he's from New York, I think, or New Jersey. And this is basically an anti-free speech law. It is about monitoring terrorist talk on social media, but that's going to be a big problem. So when I did the video a couple weeks ago, the text, I got to silence my little chat over here. The text for the Stop Hate Act of 2025 had not yet been dropped in Congress. And I kind of thought with Charlie Kirk, and he was such a free speech warrior. He effectively killed two anti-free speech bills in Congress, one in May of 2024 and one in May of 2025. And so I thought maybe they were going to lay low on the Stop Hate Act of 2025 and not introduce it, but they did. They did it last week. Again, we're in a government shutdown, and they are sponsoring lots of legislation right now. So I guess they're ready to go again. So this would formalize government platform censorship under the guise of counterterrorism. It has expanded enforcement to for flagging ideological things. So one of the things you're seeing a lot of right now is kind of the Israel debate, the Israel anti-Israel debate. And it, especially on the right, I mean, you've got a lot of people on the right that are really arguing with each other. And one of the things that's kind of concerned me, because the Republicans are in on this, is how this is going to sort of silence the dissent for anybody that maybe has criticisms of Israel, and that is not the same as being anti-Semitic. So the key provisions in the Stop Hate Act, it's HR 55681, requires social media platforms to publish terms of service related to terrorist content. It mandates triannual reports to the Department of Justice with detailed flagging and action content, appeals, and reversals. The data must be disaggregated by content type, media format, and flagging message, including civil society partners. Civil penalties, $5 million a day for non-compliance, misreporting, or omissions. So if these social media platforms are going to be punished by $5 million a day, what do you think they're going to do? Well, they're going to over-censor people so that they don't get into trouble. This includes, let's see, the DOJ must publish all reports in a searchable public database. It includes a 5-year sunset clause and intelligence reports from the DNI and GAO. It does add, so here's something that's different from this bill this year, as opposed to in the previous iterations of it in 2021 and 2023. It adds a First Amendment and Protection and Privacy Act language. But, one of the things that I think we can all say about legislation is while they may pass it with the intent, and say that we're going to protect First Amendment rights, we've seen that with other things like the Patriot Act, and a lot of these hate crime laws across the country. So that is something to keep in mind, that while they say what their intent is, doesn't always become reality. So, think about if you posted something like America should stop funding Israel. You're not violating the law, but your content could get flagged by the social media platforms. Think about the deplatforming that we saw with COVID. And if you said something that went against the COVID narrative and what they deemed was the truth about COVID, you could be deplatformed. I mean, I know people that never have gotten their Facebook accounts back, have never gotten back on Twitter, which is now X. This is actually the same thing, but it's legal. It is a law. So this is very scary. It's very concerning. Let's see. What else did they do? So one of the things about this that was really concerning is that the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, is in on this with this bipartisan Stop Hate Act. They did a press conference, like I said, back in July, and Jonathan Greenblatt, I think is his name, from the ADL. He was there for that press conference, and they're all chuckling and collaborating on this effort. Over the last few weeks, you've probably seen a lot of the viral posts about that Charlie Kirk was listed on the ADL's website under their hate speech glossary. And Charlie wasn't the only one. And I think it's interesting. I always think it's interesting, the things that are going viral on the social media platforms right now, because it's like it's like the conservative influencers get the talking points of the day, and then that goes viral. In the glossary on the ADL's website, you had a ton of different people and groups. You had Jack Posobiec, Steve Bannon, lots of different right-wing groups, Patriot Prayer. So it wasn't specific to Charlie and Turning Point. There were thousands of different people and organizations listed on this glossary. They have since taken it down, but I think it's safe to say that they are still involved in this. I do have a concern that, now that we don't have Charlie to single-handedly kill some of this free speech legislation, we have to step up to the plate. And, he had such a loud voice because he had such a huge audience across social media platforms and his video platforms and things like that, that he was able to make things go viral and get the word out and get people to contact their legislators and make a lot of noise about this. And so there's a huge burden for the rest of us to pick up, to carry this torch. But this is really important that we do this. If you are someone who has been impacted in some way by Charlie's life and subsequently his death, I would really encourage you to engage in the legislation that's happening in Congress, and especially at a state level. One of the things, and I don't have all my information in front of me right now, but I've been researching to see how many states have adopted laws since October 7th of 2023 that prohibit any kind of anti-Israel, anti-Semitism. Primarily, these laws are in schools and colleges and universities. And it's not just blue states, it's red states too. Florida passed this in 2024. So right after the October 7th attacks. It's something like half of the states in this country have adopted some anti-Israel kind of hate speech laws. And we can't just be against hate speech laws when it's coming from the left. The First Amendment is about all speech, any speech, even if you don't like it, even if it's evil, even if it's grotesque. Of course, if your speech is threatening violence and things like that, it does have its lines. But if you're criticizing another government, uh, you should be protected by the First Amendment. And these laws go against that. And the problem with these laws isn't, it doesn't just stop with that one law. All of this stuff gets expanded, and you kind of are seeing this race between the right and the left to protect whatever their pet projects are, and anything that doesn't go along with that is hate speech. So I really would encourage you to dig into this stuff, and make your voice heard. Reach out to your legislator when the time is right. And a good way to follow that, one of our biggest things, is to give people action items. So if you're not already, I would encourage you to subscribe to our Substack. That is the best way to get breaking alerts and calls to action. We're constantly putting out information. There was a Substack that went out this morning, and trying to remember what it was about. Was it about the hate speech? It might have been about stop hate. I don't even remember. I'm doing so much content, but that is the best way to get breaking alerts. I want to talk briefly about a post that went viral yesterday on X, and maybe you've seen it on Facebook and other platforms now as well. And this is another one of those things where it's like, did everybody get the talking points of the day and made this post go viral? Because the person whose account this is has like 40,000 followers on X, and that's not very many. And the post had, I don't know, yesterday when I made the video about it, had like 15 million views, and I think it's even more than that today. But the post, gosh, did I have? Yeah, this is it. Okay. Let's take a look at, let me make this go away. Okay. Eric Kaufman, he's a professor in the UK, and he did a report, and so he has a thread on X. And so if you're not on X, it's like where you attach a bunch of, multiple posts together. So it's, you read through the thread, right? So his first one is that trans identification is in a free fall among the young. Well, as someone who is into this stuff on a daily basis, I was like, what? But this got, this got picked up by all of the conservative influencers. It was, Matt Walsh and Donald Trump Jr., everybody that's kind of in the like working against the trans stuff had weighed in on this, which was really weird that they didn't, I don't think they bothered to read the report. And if you went to the very end of the thread, there was a link to his website, and then you had to click another link and you had to download the PDF, the report. And I did that. And this is a study of incoming freshmen at elite universities. Now, he cites here FIRE data in particular, and he tagged the wrong FIRE account. Freedom, I'm trying to remember what FIRE stands for, but it's basically a free speech website. And the FIRE report that he linked in his report, I went through it. It didn't even mention gender. So I'm not sure what data he was referring to, but the data that he linked didn't have anything to do with gender. And so you're looking at a small group of people and how they identify. So what the report was saying is that the number of people who chose non-binary out of the options of male, female, or non-binary decreased between the class of 2024 and the class of 2028. Now, if you've been paying attention to all of this trans stuff that's going on, and you hear people say trans women are women, trans men are men, why would they choose non-binary if they think that they are whatever they've transitioned to? They wouldn't. And he even goes on to say, and I did a video about this yesterday where I've got screenshots of all that, and I've got screenshots on the Substack as well, so you can go look there. But he even admits to people that are asking him questions in the thread, like, where did you get, like, how did you decide this? And he just drew the conclusion that trans people would select non-binary. He didn't actually ask any trans people. There were actually trans people responding to him, asking him that. And he didn't ask any trans people what they would check. And several of these trans people that were commenting on his post were saying, you know, trans people are going to select male or female because that's what they believe they are. So it was really unfortunate because all of this went viral, and you have all these conservatives that are celebrating the defeat of transgender, and it was a fad and it was a social contagion, and Trump has defeated trans and DeSantis has defeated trans. One of the things I will say is, if you live in a red state, I live in Florida, and around here, you don't see the furries, you don't see the oh, thank you, Mary. Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. That's what FIRE stands for. You don't see the funny colored hair kids. You don't see the pajama bottom wearing kids. It's, you know, and living in Western Washington with, you know, we have 5 kids between the two of us. 4 of them are mine. And for the last, you know, when we got married in 2019, we had 4 teenagers at home until we moved. And so we're pretty, you know, I would say that we have a pretty good judge of what teenagers in a deep blue state are exposed to and what they're dealing with and kind of what that culture is like. It's very different. If you are in a red state like where we live now, you don't see the same kinds of teenagers that you see if you're in Western Washington. My husband was flying home from Seattle on Sunday, and he texted me. He's like, wow, there's a lot of gender confused people at SeaTac Airport. It's something you see all the time. If you're in Washington or California or watching me right now, you know, these are people that you see all the time. So to think that, you know, if you saw a report that says it's dropping, you're probably like, what? Not here. But if you live in a state like Florida where you're not exposed to, you know, a Seattle high school or something like that, you might be able to believe that, but it is not true. We have in these blue states, they are ramping up on their transgender indoctrination in the public schools. They're ramping up protections and services and all these things for transgender kids, especially for transgender kids. And it really is, yes, it's a social contagion. It's also indoctrination. And you have adults in the school system and in the medical profession that are encouraging these children. You know, I had, my daughter was in a residential treatment program for a while. And in that program, they allowed boys that identified as girls to be in girls' spaces. They allowed her to go by he, him pronouns if she wanted. And they allowed all the kids to do that. So it's not just, and this wasn't in Washington, by the way, this was actually in Nevada. And even here in Florida, one of the residential places that we were looking at allowed boys in the girls' bedrooms if they identified as a girl. It was an all girls facility, by the way. This was in 2023, so I'd have to check and see if the legislature and DeSantis have changed that. But that shocked me because we hadn't even moved yet when we were looking at that, and I was down here for that. But all of this in summary, when you see headlines on social media, one of the things people do, and you know, we do this too, is we'll post something and we'll, like, the headline is something to grab your attention because we want you to read it. We want you to read the article. Our posts are not clickbait. Like, we will give a headline that hopefully stops you from scrolling, but then we want you to click on the video or the article and read the details of what we're trying to tell you. And one of the other things that we're very concerned about doing is making sure that we have links to everything that we're talking about, whether it's a bill or a report or whatever it is linked in the information that we give you so that you can go look for it yourself. I realize that life is moving fast and people don't want to slow down to consume the content, but as citizens, we have a responsibility to do that. We want to be reading and sharing truth and responding to things. If it's not true, we need to respond to that and not take it in and not share it as though it were true. So I urge you to be cautious of things that are going on through social media, things that are going viral, because these social media influencers get paid a lot of money to do this, and for a lot of these people, it is their livelihood. This is how they feed their children and feed their families and pay their mortgages. And so, I can tell you that if we post something about Bob Ferguson on Facebook, it gets a lot of traction. It gets a lot of engagement. If we post like a legit article about a bill, probably doesn't get as much engagement, but it impacts you more. And so I would just want to encourage you to keep these things in mind as you're going through social media. It's all business now. We're no better than the mainstream media. I hope that some of us are. Anyway, let's see. Why do you support Trump if he's a pedophile? It's a serious question. He has literally told on himself many times. Well, he may be. I don't know that I've seen him with children. I don't know if that claim is accurate. Trump isn't perfect. I support Trump because he's not Kamala Harris. I don't support everything Trump says or does. But I did vote for him, and I voted for him because he was far better than Kamala Harris. There are a lot of things I wish he'd do differently, like release the Epstein files. I wish he would do that as well. Oh, one other thing I wanted to tell you guys, the Epstein files reminded me of this. Last week, I think it was last week, Trump had a bunch of independent journalists to the White House to talk about Antifa. And there have been a couple of reports released. I covered this in last week's live stream. There have been two different reports released that I have seen that are about Antifa and the Antifa funding and things like that. Here's another thing. If you download the report and you actually dig through the report, there's no connection to Antifa. There's 25,000 in one of the reports, but the other report, both of the reports are mainly anti-Israel groups. And the whole Antifa thing at the White House kind of reminded me of the Epstein Bindergate issue, where all the conservative influencers went to the White House and got their binders, and they had the Epstein files, and they're going to start telling us, and we, how many months ago was that? 6 months ago, and we still have nothing. The same thing is going to happen with Antifa. Mark my words. There have been no arrests. Why? Why have there not been any arrests? Because there's plenty of Antifa out running around on the streets of Portland and probably Seattle. So why haven't they arrested any of these people? And why are the reports full of anti-Israel, pro-Hamas groups? I think those are bad organizations that need attention. But why are we calling them Antifa when that's not what they are? So Antifa is not going to be, I don't think anything's going to be done about Antifa, unfortunately, because people in Seattle, Portland, and areas where Antifa has a lot of activity need the federal government's help. But I don't think anything's going to be done. However, you had the executive order to designate Antifa as a terrorist organization, and to codify the executive order into law, you need legislation. And Senator Rick Scott from here in Florida, he filed the legislation to designate Antifa a domestic terrorist organization. I want to say it was either the end of last week or earlier this week. So that is good. Government's shut down. So we've got all these bills being introduced, but nothing being done about them. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. We will be watching that bill, which again, you can check out our, be sure to subscribe to our Substack, because that is where you can get all of the updates and breaking alerts as these things are moving along. We try to keep that really updated. We're sending them out pretty much every day. Sometimes there's a couple of days, sometimes there's not any that day, but there's a lot of stuff going on. So we've been putting out a lot of content. You can also find stuff on our website, conservativeladiesofamerica.com. If you would like to support our work, you can head over to our Give Send Go, which is givesendgo.com/conservative ladies US. And that we are just a citizen-run organization. We don't have any big donors, so everything that we are able to do is accomplished by the generous donations of folks like you. I don't see any questions in the chat, so we will call it a day. I plan to be here again next week on the live stream. I think I told you guys last week I'm not always super consistent with the live streams because, well, my livelihood doesn't depend on live streaming, so which is good because some days I just don't feel like going on video. But I do try to be here every Thursday, and I'm sure there will be more for us to talk about, and I plan to be here next week. So I hope to see you. Please do share this live stream, the replay, so that other people can watch it and know what is going on right now. The biggest thing with what's going on the West Coast is, I realize it's easy to pass it off as unconstitutional and Trump's going to come in and save the day. But I don't believe that that's going to happen. I wish that were the case, but I think what we're going to continue to see is these blue states joining together, collaborating, creating a coalition and an alliance to really divide themselves, separate themselves from the federal government. I think that divide is going to get stronger and worse, and that's not good for us as citizens. That's not good for our country. So be a peaceful resistor and get involved in some way at a local level, at a state level. Reach out to us. You can email me, julie@conservativeladiesofamerica.com. If you need help trying to figure out where to plug in, I'd be happy to chat with you about that. So thanks so much for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great weekend.